Awards, don't talk to me about awards. Costume quality.
Thanks. Once again, we had to look at someone who was dressed wearing costumes during the convention. The costumes had to be well made, well finished, presented very well. And we found someone who wore 3 costumes at least. They came as a Klingon, a medieval lady, and from Elfquest, and it was Karen Holden.
The award for Artisans Award, of course. Adrian and Marianne were our judges, so they're going to present it and tell us a little about the judging of it.
Thank you. The Artisans Award, Marianne and myself would be very closely, not just the items in the show, not just what people were wearing at the masquerade and the costumes, but what people had made in wardrobe accessories. We will see their ingenuity, creativity, originality. We had a look at what's in the accessory. Basically, we had a look everywhere, and some people found us looking carefully at them, asking questions about what they've made, how they've made it. And I'd like to thank everyone who went to the effort of making something and wearing that convention, because everyone who did that added a lot to the convention. And there's a lot of creativity here. We found it a very hard choice, but we were very impressed with what we saw. We'd like to see more of it, more of you. Come on, there's lots of talented people out there. But what impressed us the most was actually the work by Peter Lipinski. And I'd like to ask him to come up to receive the award now. Alison.
Something like that. And this is kind of fun because on the back this is one that Jerry Anderson signed to me. So I've got Jerry's autograph on the back of that. I thought people might be interested in looking at that. And then I brought along some these are my own personal scripts that I used in the series. As you can see, they're showing their age, like its user. This one was not mine personally, but it's one from the series, one of the original scripts. This one from Time Lash with authentic coffee stains on it, circa 1969, whatever they are. I think there's some call sheets in there, and cast lists, and my notes. Don't worry, I've been all through it, so it's all cleaned up and perfectly presentable. Yes, this is one of our call sheets with the various actors, the scene numbers that would be shot on that particular day, the dressing room assignments, all. This is those of you who are familiar with filming, this is the Bible. Whoever, when they publish that on one day, that's the next day's work, and everybody works to that particular schedule. And that's one there, 1970. Yeah, 1970. On a Saturday we were shooting. Time Lash. Ed Bishop, Wanda Ventham, Patrick Allen. Those of you who know the series, I think that was in the little miniature cars were being run around. So they might be kind of leave behind. And script amendments. These might be interesting to people who are kind of students of the series. Last is this the UFO Annual. I don't know if they're available here in Australia. They might have dripped here. But this one again was unique because it's signed to me by Jerry Anderson himself. That might be kind of fun. Unfortunately, my kids have marked them, as kids have a tendency to do. That might be kind of fun. What else? Last but not least, my constant traveling companion. Now, talk about working in close proximity with the watch. It's nothing like the proximity you with a wig. I mean, but you might want to look at that. It's absolutely 100% clean and tidy, but it used to get very, as you can imagine, a full helmet wig like that, working in the underneath the lights. And these were at the time about 500 guineas, the cost of these. A lot of money, and every individual hair is tied on individually. So and it's all done by hand. So you can understand how and this is made by Simon Wiggs in London, which is one of the premier wig manufacturers in the world for theatrical and films, etc. So that might be kind of fun I should have a block, you know, those little wig blocks, but perhaps we can set these up somewhere. Well, I don't have a great deal to say to launch things off, and I'm hoping that people will ask me questions, which will then trigger me on to say whatever you want to say. And please feel free to ask any kind of question you want to. That doesn't guarantee I'll answer it, but I'll handle any question you want. Just to briefly fill in, you know that I worked on Captain Scarlet and then on Doppelganger, and from Doppelganger came the UFO series. The Straker character was not originally intended to figure so much in the series. He was originally a book they thought the character would what's that? Provide a sample. No.
No. Can we stick the wig on that?
Oh, I see. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. This is unrehearsed. Totally spontaneous. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Just sit there and be quiet. Yeah, originally the old hard-ass Straker was intended to remain in the office, and he was going to be the sender-outer of other people, or to have the, you know, that the office was supposed to be the nerve center. But fairly early on in the series, they thought that the had more leeway exploitation, and he could get out of the office and get out and about, and that's the character developed. Again, I find that as a kind of a reservation. I enjoyed getting out of the office and getting out and about more, but as I've talked individually to people over the days that I've been here, I think it indicated a slight lack of preparation, contrasting it with Star Trek, where they did a vast amount of research into what characters would be here, what continuity would follow. Well, I think if we had a failing, that was it in our preparation. And a lot of people who are real aficionados of the series UFO will know that one character appears in one episode and gets killed and may very well turn up in a subsequent episode as somebody else. Well, this is a certain amount of lack of preparation in the overall planning of the series, and that plus other factors may be one of the reasons why it didn't capture the imagination to, say, the extent that Star Trek did. But nonetheless, there is your presence here indicates a very sincere and dedicated bunch of connoisseurs, I would say, of the finer things in television sci-fi. And it's always a pleasure, deep pleasure, sincerely felt, to meet you folks. I could go on and on with a monologue, which I'm sure will be touching on points that you will want to raise in your questioning, and so I think we'll just throw it open right from there. I think we had a question in the back. Is it a coincidence that Straker and Captain Blue had the same hairstyle? Was there a sort of a connection, do you think? Well, the only connection was me, I suppose. As I've said, that Sylvia Anderson was responsible for the entire presentation of the characters, and I just think she felt that that coloring seemed to go best with me, and I don't have a very good fashion sense myself. If I'm on a film, I mean, I was at dinner last night, I wore a suit which came from, it was an Yves Saint Laurent suit that I wore in a picture that we made in Germany. And I figured that the designer, he knew better than I did what I looked best in. So I bought the suit at the end of it. I wore this suit in a television, BBC television drama about rabies, which was very successful. And I had to play a rich businessman, and at the end of the shoot, I decided I would buy the suit. So that's where most of my clothes wardrobe comes from, because I don't like going into the stores and buying, and do I look, is this, fortunately my daughters have got very good fashion sense. And they always say, Daddy, you look best in that. So I depend on other people for that. But the presentation of Straker visually was down to Sylvia, and yeah, I suppose that there was a continuity between Scarlett, who I thought looked a little bit like Adam Faith. You remember Adam Faith, the singer? Yeah, but he never complained, so I'm not going to. Anything else?
If they were to start up UFO games, would you take over Commander Shaper again?
When do we start? Tomorrow? Yes, yes. I've often said this at various conventions and meetings that I never could understand why there wasn't some kind of a spin-off, a feature film or whatever from the series, because although it didn't achieve vast success, I think there's enough interest, and there's certainly the format there for someone to come up with a very interesting script as to what happened to that all. I don't know, I have no confirmed any ideas about it, but I somehow see Straker down and out somewhere in 1990, whatever, and he's babbling on about UFOs, and people treat him as a joke, oh, buy him another drink kind of thing, and somehow or other that's the point of departure. Then we go back and find out what happened to all this kind of menace that existed at that time, which I also think, if I can be parenthetic for a moment, that the political situation with the end of the war, the so-called Cold War, which never really existed, but that's another story, but the threat of the alien invasion that never succeeded, it never came off, and here's a guy still screaming about it, and I think there's a lot of interesting themes that could be picked up there, but if what it needs is somebody to sit down and write a script. They would get me very, very quickly in on a project like that, because you see a lot of these science fiction, I'm not a fan of the genre, but you take a picture like Dark Star, which I think is a wonderful film, made for 50 cents in somebody's garage, you know, but if you had a good, tight script and an intelligent approach to it, yeah, I think there could be a very successful. I think the time is probably right for it. To shoot it here, right here in Australia. Yeah, somebody asked me earlier about the cars. I'd like to come back to them because they were really, when you got a break, when they sent you a script, and with a breakdown of what the first thing you look for is how long am I in those wretched cars? Because they were really very, very difficult to work in. There were a huge plastic bubble set on a Ford Cortina frame. They didn't have engines in themselves, so they had to be towed everywhere. And you would then have to be tied up to what they call a Casper truck, which was nothing more than the car was on a low loader, well, on wheels, and with a fixed axle to a truck, the camera truck. So that the old days, before they invented that, if the actor was driving and he had to get, you know, it was one of these things, and he was constantly going in and out of focus. So some clever guy said, well, look, let's make a fixed axle, and we'll hold focus permanently. And the guy made himself £1 million developing that. So you'd sit there in this thing, you know, just doing this type of acting and, you know, with your lines. And they were very stuffy because there was no ventilation in there. So after 15, 20 minutes, you were really very glad to get out. And of course, the gull wing doors never worked. If you ever study it very carefully, you'll see that that there's always a don't see. And there was Harry, the prop man. And we had to go again many, many times on shots like that because Harry did it that way instead of getting a smooth up and out. But no, the cars were not very pleasant. And then if you had to work in the studio, it was possible. It was even worse because you were clamped in there and they had the traveling mat behind you with the background. And that never really looked real, I didn't think. And I said just now that they didn't work, but that's not strictly speaking true because they did have kind of an auxiliary engine in them, so you could go 400 or 500 yards so that they get an up and past shot. And they had these things duplicated in models so that they could shoot them on model sets. So it was very, very, very punishing to be in the work in those cars. They were very, very actor unfriendly. And you had to worry about sound because the microphones were in there. And they were quite a bit of a challenge to work in. I don't know what happened to them, but some guy bought, some disc jockey in England bought the Straker car, and he renovated it and used to farm it out to for exhibitions and that sort of thing. Where they are now, I've no idea. But they were just basically this plastic hull on top of an engine frame, and that's all there was to them. Anybody else got a young man? Make it easy, pal.
Did you act as Captain Blue or Captain Scarlet?
I was the voice of Captain Blue. Yeah. I can't develop that any further. No, don't give him hell. Ah, sir. Madam, sorry. I'm my hard of seeing, I'm hard of hearing. You can just...
In both times that you worked in the professional,
yeah.
You played an American.
Yeah.
Do you often get to play an American?
Well, that's all I play in England is Americans. There was a certain period in my career when I tried to lose accent sufficiently to work and play all kinds of, you know, English parts and all the rest of it. But that was a very bad disaster. I've got a very bad ear, musical ear. It's a tin ear. I can't get through Happy Birthday without an awful lot of help. And I have no musical sense whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I appeared in a film called Lords of Discipline. And I met the director, and he said, can you do a Southern American accent? And I said, no. I said, I can do this. I can do it fast, or I can do it slow, and that's the only permutations. But fortunately, I looked like the young actor. They were casting his father, and I looked very similar to him. And Barbara Bascom was his mother, and so there was a family kind of tie-up. And they hired a very charming American girl who was a voice coach. And she worked with me very, very hard on this Southern accent that I was supposed to do. And I just forgot all about it. I said, no way are they going to allow me to do this horrible Southern American accent. And so I just simply forgot about it, and I went through the part and did it. I said, they're going to post-sync me, I'm sure. And then I was very pleasantly surprised to go to the premiere and see that they had not post-sunk me, and that the Southern accent had stayed. And I was very, very pleased about that. I can't tell you what a shot in the arm it gave my confidence. So suddenly I became very, very cocky. Which reminds me of an incident that happened during the filming of UFO. It was a terrible, terrible scene. I was wearing a very flashy costume, very unstraker-like costume. And Billington came in, and his line was, "Well, you sure look sharp today, Commander," or something like that. And all my line was to say, "Well, I'm just wearing what I suppose any well-dressed film executive would wear." That was basically the line. And Ken Turner suggested, "Hey, Eddie, why don't you send the line up and do it in a southern Southern American accent?" So I did, and it was, I went to the Rushes the next day, and it was the most embarrassing experience of my life. To suddenly see Straker, this, you know, ironclad, "Well, I was just wearing whatever I think a film executive ought to wear." And I went on my knees to Jerry, and I said, "Look, I will pay for the," thank you very much, "I will pay for the reshoot of that scene, regardless of what it costs." And he looked at it, he says, "Yes, Ed, I agree with you, it should be shot." He said, "But we'll take the easy way out." And so what I think happens is that they play it on Billington, and I just went in and revoiced it and said it normally. But that was my brush with accents in UFO. It's always been a bit of a problem, because I don't know, I'm just inhibited about doing anything in any kind of accent or anything that requires any kind of musical sense to it, because I just don't possess that. And which is a pity, because when I started to work in London in the 60s, there was an awful lot of American musicals being done, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, and there were lots of parts that I could have been considered for, but I went out there and I gave it the old college try. I mean, I went to coaches, and the coach would say, "Hit that note, bong, bong, bong." I go, "Oh," and I said, "No, that's it." So I really just said no more. I'm sorry, what? Well, I graduated from Boston University in 1959, their theater arts division, and some program, the United States Fulbright program, and I went out and tried out for one of their scholarships. And I don't know, I think it's worth mentioning, because there's a wonderful Republican Senator Fulbright of Arkansas, who after the war, World War II, everybody owed money to America because through the Lend-Lease program, and many of these nations would never pay back or couldn't pay back. And so it was his idea to send students abroad, and the host country would pay the expenses and tuition of the student in their country, so they would not lose currency by having to export money out of the country. It was a very imaginative program. And all you had to do is go to the Fulbright Commission and say, "I want to study the following project," and outline it. And if it was intelligent enough and articulate enough, they would consider it. I knew a woman who went out and studied open-air theater. And she went to Athens and Rome and studied all the amphitheaters of the ancient world. And somebody made a joke, you could get a Fulbright scholarship in pole vaulting if you wanted to. And they did give a certain amount of scholarships in the arts, drama, music, and all the rest of it. And they had drama scholarships, and I applied for one. And there were over 700 applications for only 6 in the drama department. I was very fortunate to get one. So when I left Boston University, I accepted this grant and went to study for 1 year in England. And I was single in those days and had nothing to come back to, I mean, to the States. And I just thought, well, I'll try it for a year or so and see what happens. And fortunately, I got busy, and then I met my wife, and we got married, and children, and mortgage, and the career, I must say, carried on. I mean, I've done nothing but act for the past 33 years in England, but I only ever do American parts. That was the except for that one sojourn when I tried to lose my accent but was unsuccessful. But there are American actors who live in England who lost their accent so sufficiently to take part in Shakespeare. And I think that's a wonderful accomplishment, to play Shakespeare in London and being a foreigner. But unfortunately, I never achieved that. But I'm fortunate in one way, because when commercial radio started up in England in 1976, they, you know, kind of butch American voices were in demand. And so I got in on the ground floor with that, and it's been a very, very wonderful adjunct to my income, so which enabled me to, you know, sort of pick and choose. And you wonder sometimes what would have happened, because I did come back to New York in '64. I got into a play in London which came to New York. We were there at the time of President Kennedy's murder, which was, what, 30 years ago, and I was appearing on Broadway at that time, and my wife came over and joined me, and we literally flipped the coin, because I had a couple of offers for plays in New York, and I said, no, I don't know. I'd started over in England, had 2 or 3 years, had an agent over there, and besides, my fare was paid back to England. Seemed a shame to waste it. And my wife was pregnant with our first child at that time, and we had no Blue Cross, and as you know, the medical costs in America are prohibitive. And there was a health scheme in England that we could take advantage of to have the child. But there's a wonderful poem by Robert Frost that I often think about. It's called "The Road Not Taken." I'm not going to recite it, don't worry. and it's just about the poet walking down this path in this country lane, and there are 2 paths, and he doesn't know which one to take, and he takes one for some silly reason, simply because that path has not been trodden on so much. The other path was well worn. And he went down there, and he gets to the end of it, and he wonders what would happen if he had taken that road. And I'm kind of at that position now, where I think what would have happened if I had stayed in the States and all the rest of it. It's interesting to ponder, because as I said, there's so many variables in this business. How you get a job or why, it's very, very confusing, and you just don't know what would have happened there. Enough philosophy over. Next question. Sir.
Someone who earlier on was saying to ask you about your time with Lewis Collins.
Time what?
What was it like to act with Lewis Collins?
Oh, those guys. Yeah. Well, they were very, very. They were at the start of their careers, you know, and they took everything very, very seriously. And I worked with Michael Billington, for example, and Mike was very similar to them, because he was a young, athletic, virile. That's what the products demanded at that time in the 70s, and certainly in TV series. And this was a big job, you know, to suddenly be co-starring in a big production like this. And they were very serious guys. They took their work very seriously, as Michael did. And they were constantly interested in perfecting their craft. And there wasn't a lot of fat, you know what I mean? There wasn't any time for leisure, like get on a big budget film like a Bond film. Maybe you could take a few days, you know. But on TV series, you work very, very hard. And what I had to do with those guys, I was impressed by their professionalism and their sincerity and their dedication to their craft. You hear stories afterward about friction between the two of them. Well, I certainly saw no evidence of that. During one of my CIA incarnations, I always seem to wear a suit when I'm on a film, and we were filming at this very, very, very exclusive, ultra-exclusive golf club in England that was broke. And you'd have to be very, very broke to farm your place out, your home, whatever you own, to a film unit, because film units come in and it's Gute Dämmerung. They just take over and run wires here, there, and they not noted for their finesse. because the important thing is to get the shots in. And one of the actors was playing the part of an Arab, and he had all the robes on and the headdress, and I had my sharp suit and my briefcase. And I don't know whether I suggested it or he did, but up on the porch there was a whole row of these old retired colonels who belonged to the golf club. And I said, let's have some fun. So they couldn't hear what we were saying, but I sort of led this Arab around with my briefcase, and all I did was you know, gesture with my hand like this, you know, and he would nod like that. And of course, all the old colonels, they thought, my God, they're going to sell the place to the Arabs, you know. And I say, old Crothers, you know, what's going on here? That's my one abiding memory of the Professionals. Plus a lot of rain on the second location. We spent a lot of time in the trailers on that. And of course, that wonderful Scott actor, Gordon, yeah, he was a wonderful guy. And was there a girl in that, a resident heroine, or I don't see her? But I wonder if you've seen any of the comedy strip spoof takeoffs of the Professionals. Oh, I must send you some video of that. That is absolutely these two. The what? Well, I don't know, but they keep on, every time you see them, they wear less and less clothing. And they're always cover me, you know, and they you know, dancing around, and it's absolutely hilarious because the original was so good, I think. And both those guys are doing very well now. Martin, I think, played Elvis Presley, which I saw, which was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. You didn't like it? You missed it, all right. But, and yeah, they're both doing very well, very well. Not Sacco on the international scene, but certainly within the UK, they're doing a lot of interesting jobs. And it's great to be that kind of a jobbing actor, which is what I am now. I mean, it's obvious I didn't, the Straker character did not catapult me into mega world, but being able to move around from job to job in the UK particularly, you get a chance to work with people like that. It's very interesting.
Can I ask another question, please? Michael Billington, that you worked with in UFO, I know it's probably a stupid question, but did he become a writer, or did he write articles for any magazine?
No, you may be confusing. There's a very eminent English drama critic by the name of Michael Billington. No relation. This man is very mature. But Michael did, after UFO, he co-starred in a series called The Oneida Line, which was based in Victorian times in England about a sailing line, shipping line. He was very good in it. Pardon? That's right, yes. Has it been shown here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then Mike went to, he literally got within half an inch of being the next James Bond. I know that for a fact. Immediately after the Lazenby disaster, they were looking around for a new Bond, and Mike was literally within a hair's breadth of becoming the next Bond. And then at the last moment, Broccoli and Saltzman apparently got cold feet because they had been so badly stung with another unknown that they decided to go with a known actor with a proven track record, which was Roger Moore, who was brilliant, I thought. And I think Mike was very disappointed. Then he went to L.A. and lived out there for a number of years. And I think he was romantically involved with one of the Broccoli girl or the Saltzman girl. That's just a little apropos of nothing, really, a little gossip. But and I saw him guesting in a lot of American series, special guest star Mike Billington. And then he came back, and now he's writing and directing primarily. But as I've said earlier, he doesn't come out to the cons, and I think he may be unhappy about UFO. He wasn't happy in his work with it, you know, how it turned out. So he's a little bit reluctant, but I'm working on him. I keep in touch with him, and I'm trying to get him to come out, because a lot of people would like to meet him, you know, and talk to him, because his character was very well appreciated. And I was very fond of Michael, because he was very, very, very ambitious, and I think I've never been ambitious. As long as I had a job and I was paying the rent, I was happy. But Mike wanted to get as far as possible in the business, and I think a young actor should be. You should have ambition and want to get out to the top as fast as you can. And I think that if he had been a Bond, there's no question about it, he would have been a very, very eminent international film star, because he was very, very serious, like these two boys I spoke of earlier. And Mike took me into his confidence, because I had been an actor X number of years longer than he had done. I'd been through drama school, and Mike, I don't know whether he trained formally or not, but he had come up through musicals. He was a very fine singer. Yes, he sang in one of our episodes, Beautiful Dreamer, yeah. And he used to come to me, and I found it touching. I use the word unashamedly, that he would come to me and ask me my advice on a certain scene, or how to, you know, cope with this, and I would, not that I was an expert, but I would certainly give him my opinion to help whatever I could. I was very fond of Mike, although we were completely different. And he was a health fanatic before health fanaticism became fashionable. You'd have his bowl of salad, you know, for lunch, and he had his weights in his dressing room and all the rest of it, and physical fitness and non-smoking, non-drinking. And I must say also, and this is not gossip, it's just the truth, whatever it is that women like, Michael had. Whatever, and this was true off-screen as well as on. He had a charisma about him, and he was very charming. And this was pre-AIDS and everything, and it was during the promiscuous swinging 70s or whatever they were. And Michael was very, very successful with women. Whatever musk he gave off, we used to sit there and envy him. You know, the most beautiful girl would come on the set, and she'd be gone like that, you know. And, but he was always a gentleman, and he never bragged. He was very laid back and cool about it. And I was very, very fond of Michael. I liked him.
Ed, would you like to tell us what happened to some of the other people from UFO, what they're doing now?
Ah, yes. Well, we're all surprisingly still making a living. George Sewell is, as we speak, in a play on tour. Gay Ellis is in the West End, which is the equivalent of Broadway, in a play, playing somebody's mother. Would you believe that? Time passes. The Importance of Being Earnest, Oscar Wilde. Antonia Ellis is doing very well in New York, in America. She went out there, 10, 15 years ago, and I've read some reviews of her in some wonderful musicals in the West End. She was essentially a singer-dancer. She's doing very well. Francis Matthews, although he wasn't in UFO, he's still doing very well. He produces his own plays, and he and his wife go out and star in them, and they tour in England and do very well on that. Georgie Sewell, of course, dear old Vladek died very recently, but he was busy up till the end. Who?
What about Wanda Benson?
Wanda, yes, thank you. She's still working, and I think she's in a play at this moment on tour in England, and she turns up on television, yeah. Gabrielle Ellis. Aisha, I don't know, she's sunk without trace. I think she went to L.A., but I think her interest was mainly in popular music. She was a singer and that. Gary Myers, who was down on the submarine, he was did a series of commercials because the lady loves black magic. Do you know those kind of commercials? He was a sort of stunt man, and he always brought the girl this box of candy because she loved it. He must have made a good fortune out of that. But yeah, most of us are still around, making a living, yeah.
You were actually saying last night that you felt in some way the casting of the Colonel Lake character as the replacement for George Sewell, the Freeman character in the last episode of UFO. You thought that was a mistake in some way. What were you saying, that you thought putting a female in was the wrong?
No, no, because it was actually my suggestion that they employ a female assistant for Straker. Because when George left the series to fulfill his own contractual obligations, they were looking at other actors to take over that slot. And it was then that I suggested, well, why don't they get a woman, an actress, female assistant for Straker? And they thought, this is a good idea, and that was the last I heard of it. The next thing I knew, Wanda was there. And I think she worked out very well. And I certainly enjoyed working with her. She was a wonderful professional to work with, and we got along very well. But I just think it was a mistake, might possibly have been a mistake, to cast this character who appeared briefly in the opening pilot, the first episode, and then you didn't see her at all throughout this part of the series, and then suddenly, bang, she turns up as a number 2. That might have been a technical error, but certainly the concept of casting a female was not at all, and again, they jumped on it because, as we mentioned earlier, I think Jerry and Sylvia were, you know, ahead of their times as far as that goes. That was back in 67, 68, and that sort of female equivalent was not prevalent. I mean, they had girls in series, but they were mainly decorative, although there were 1 or 2 adventurous series where the girl assumed some kind of decision-making responsibility rather than just being a bit of decoration on the set. But I think maybe that was, you know, it could have been one of those flaws that they didn't attend to enough detail.
How did you feel about the change from MGM to Pinewood for filming the additional episodes? Did you find that was a sort of a jolt in readjusting to another location?
No, but what you see, we shot 9 episodes at MGM, and this was a time, as I said earlier, that Jerry had brought all the directors from the Puppet series with him, and all the writers and all the editors. And those 9 that we shot there were slow, and they were predictable. And I think the audience was there ahead of us many times. And when the audience gets ahead of the characters, you're in trouble. It's almost saying, look out behind you, they're shouting. But during the hiatus, before we went to Pinewood, they revamped all that, and they brought in a lot of directors who were used to working with live-action series. And these men were very, very clever about, they could look at 4 or 5 pages of dialogue and know exactly how they're going to shoot it. And so they could send it to the cutting room. All they had to do was glue the ends together, and it would work. Cyril Franklin and Jeremy Summers, Dave Tomlin, who worked on the Prisoner series, was a guy who came in. They were very good guys, and I call them hack directors, but with a capital H, because they were specialists in that field. And the writers also, they got some new writers in. And I think that the episodes that we shot at Pinewood were far superior to the ones that we made it. And I could practically tell you, just looking at 5 minutes of it, whether it was an MGM or a Pinewood episode. But the actual physical shock of moving from studio to studio, no. I had a wonderful dressing room in Pinewood, much better. And we actually filmed in and around my dressing room and on the dressing room block. We used the studio more. We got out and about more, and it was more action. And they were very clever because they would use the back lot of Pinewood, which had tons and tons of scenery, left over from Ken Russell was making The Devils out there at that time, and Bond pictures were being shot there. And they would use those old sets, because after all, Harlington Straker was a film studio, so they could move in and among that stuff. And it was a lot more imaginative, more of what I hoped the series would have been, and could have been, if we had gone for another 13 episodes, as we almost did. Did you have a question?
In the film Turnaround, where you were the son of Eddie Albert, did you do your own magic tricks in that?
Yes, yes. Hands up those who saw that. It was a film I made in Norway called Turnaround with Eddie Albert. And yeah, and there was a lot of young American actors who come out. Wonderful. I had 5 glorious weeks over there in Oslo. And it was Eddie Albert, wonderful old American actor, played my father, and the boy who was on Golden Pond was my son. So it was a dynastic sort of thing. And we had to do a lot of magic. It was all about magicians and magic. And yeah, I did those tricks, yeah. I enjoyed doing that enormously. Quite a nice part, and I love being in Norway. Yeah, shot in Norway. Huh.
Do you
Sir.
prefer working on celluloid or in plays?
No, I prefer film. Yeah, absolutely. I adore working in films. There's a certain immediacy about motion pictures. You know, the idea of getting up early in the morning and going into makeup, and although it's never happened to me, getting into bed with somebody, you know, and say, good morning, how are you? You want to run your lines? Okay, fine. And Kevin's approaching me from the right here, like the Acme Finance Company, about to repossess the table.
You'll remember me, I interrupted it the last time. It got interesting. Could we ask you to just take a 10-minute break? It's now midnight in New York, and we're just putting a call through for 10 minutes.
Sure.
And then we'll...
Okay. Okay. I'll just, if I wrap up this story, then you stop me whenever you like.
5 more minutes.
Okay. Did you see Officer and a Gentleman? Everybody see that? And the scenes between Richard Gere and Deborah Winger, I mean, oh, God, the degree of intimacy. And then when we shot Lords of Discipline, I met a lot of American actors who knew, because they were all new young actors. And I talked about it, how could you get into bed, and the professionalism, the dedication. And these guys all laughed, and they said yes, because they absolutely detested each other. And how could you possibly do that at 8:30 in the morning? And with somebody who you detested. But it just shows you what brilliant actors they were. There certainly wasn't any trace of that in the... But all that, I've missed all that. So, they're calling New York now. No, but the immediacy of films, and people say, oh, well, you miss a live audience, but you know, you can have 100, 150 people on a film set, and they're your audience, and they're a tough audience because they're all professionals like yourself, you know, and if you can get the prop man or the carpenter to say, hey, team really achieve something, and the immediacy of knowing that, all right, you can go again and again, but in the back of your mind is that this is going to be over, you know, it's going to be, I don't know, there's making a vision like UFO, we had day turnaround to get 55 minutes in the can. There's a lot of pressure, and then when we moved to Pinewood, they cut it down to 9 days as a cost-cutting exercise. So to get 55 minutes in 9 days in the can, you had to work very, very hard. And I enjoy working hard. I like that, and shooting out on location, down a real street. I was filming in the BBC in a sleazy part of London for this one I was telling you about. there's a shot of this guy walking down this strip clubs and clip joints and all the rest, and they had a long shot. I made the camera down, and I saw a pal of mine. He says, "Hey, Eddie," he says, "how you doing?" I said, "Ah, not bad. How you doing?" I said, we shook hands, yeah. He said, "What are you up to?" I said, "Well, I'm working on a film." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, no kidding." He said, "When are you doing it?" He said, "I'm doing it right now." You're in shot. What? And they kept that, you know. They showed it in the Russians. Guy, well, where, you know. Well, that's the kind of madness that can occur in films. And it seems that when a film company comes in, that reality goes out the window, and the reality is created by the situation that you're filming. And as I say, nothing matters except getting the shot. And they've got to move that pillar 3 feet that way, you know, and hold up all the traffic and stop the people walking. They'll do it. And after, you know, 5 hard days out at Pinewood, and I stayed in my dressing room. I didn't go home because I had a long drive, and it was just too much work. It was easier to finish and grab a meal and have a shower and learn my lines and go to bed at 9 o'clock. But after I would go back to London after 5 consecutive days of that, I'd be walking down the street, and I felt like all the people were extras, you know, walking through some massive shot. But of the choice, yes, hands down, I would prefer to work on film. In theater, strangely enough, you're more in control. There's, you know, if something goes wrong and you're with a bunch of actors who know their craft, you can somehow or other hack your way out of trouble. But in the films, even though you do it in a short little shots, like that, it's the intensity of it that really is sort of a love-hate thing, you know. It's like a moth and a flame thing. It's very difficult, but you go towards it because you enjoy it so much.
Somebody down the back got a question.
Just the other day you mentioned that UFO was very, very nearly got renewed. I wonder whether you could speak a bit about that.
The renewal of UFO, the second season.
Yes, yeah, we came literally within very toss of a coin. As a matter of fact, the 4 or 5 episodes that they had written for the new series, when CBS didn't pick up their option, they revamped some of those scripts for the Space 1999 series. And I'm told, I haven't seen 1999, but I'm told that, I mean, people who are really on the ball, they can spot bits of our scenery, you know, incorporated in various sets. So we did come very close, and I'm very, very sorry that we didn't, because I think we learned so much in the first series that had we gone on, it would have developed into a very important series. I'm absolutely confident of that. But that's showbiz.
Tell us about Saturn 3.
Saturn 3, who saw Saturn 3? Well, yeah, that was, it was one of those extraordinary jobs. I was working on a film called SOS Titanic, which sank with all hands, sank without trace. And my agent called me up and said they're shooting 3, and would I go over and meet the director, who is a very, very famous director, who's a household name, whose name I've forgotten. He did On the Town, wonderful, wonderful director, and he had this part, and I went over and I met him. I just literally walked off the set of, and there's nothing like walking off the set of one movie to go over and see the director about another movie, you know. He's kind of confident. And I met him and we talked. He described the part, and he said, yes, I think he'd be fine. So they took me immediately over to the costume wardrobe. And we got on these space suits, yes, okay. I felt right at home, you know, hoses and silver suits and all the rest of it. And they said, try on the helmet. And I said, well, we won't need that. And they said, oh, well, let's just try it on for size. I had to get out of that. So it was about a 3 or 4 page scene. We were the guys in the spaceship who almost boarded them. And the monster took over the voice of the guy, Kirk Douglas, and said everything's okay, you don't need to come by and check. And we had this lovely 3 or 4 page scene. We're flying by there, and hi, how you doing? Shall we come on board? And the monster didn't want us to come on board, obviously, because he had taken the ship or was taking it over. And it was an awful lot of money, because they kept on canceling the day that we were supposed to go out and film this. And it went on for 3 weeks. I couldn't believe the checks that were fluttering through. And we finally turned up in there, and we got into this mock-up set, and we're all there, you know, and the guy that played we were all, everything. And the director, who, God darn, I wish I could think of his name, he said, okay, put on the helmets. And I said, what? And we actually, I'm comatose to this moment in recollection. We put on the helmets, and he shouted at us, says, all right, touch a button. Look out there. Wave. And we did this for about 5-10 minutes. He said, okay, cut. That's fine, fellas, fine. And he says, okay, now we'll go over to the sound studio and read the part. We could have been monkeys sitting in there underneath, you know. And then we just go, how you doing? You know, and we give a radio performance. I mean, that's Saturn III, and it just shows you the kind of ridiculousness that happens in motion pictures sometimes. No, they could have filmed it for a fraction of the cost. Get a couple of monkeys, do the and then wheel in the actors to do the voiceover. But no, it wasn't a very successful picture, I gather. Harvey Keitel, Kirk Douglas. Who's the girl in there? Rivera, yeah. And they were working very hard out there, but just somehow didn't quite come off. A further adventure in space.
Do you find that you get confused with some of your lines? You do when you're doing let me say when you're doing UFO, did you sometimes get lines from one episode confused with lines from another episode?
No. No, but they did do a couple of shots of me. I was on the set filming in one episode, and the director came in great panic, excuse me, and said, would I get into this costume immediately and just look left? And I didn't know what the hell they wanted it for, but when they were shooting the previous episode, they needed that sort of reaction shot, you know, so they'd quickly come in with a different jumper or sweater. You get in there and look left. Okay, cut. That's it. Fine. Thank you, Eddie. And you go back and, well, what the hell was all that about? You know? But fortunately, very, very little of that, because from the technical standpoint, they had it very well thought out. They had an excellent production manager. It's almost as if we're expecting a line from the White House here at any moment.
Ed, I was just watching a little sequence on video earlier of you in The Young Indiana Jones, where you sort of die rather dramatically.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
Would you like to tell us how many times you've died on screen?
Excuse me, please, before we get the answer to that, could we have our phone call to General?
Who am I talking to?
You and I.
I lost my head.
You hung up.
That's all.
I love modern technology. I can't believe it. What did you say? I didn't say it. Sure. maybe you should have.
What did you think to the last phone call, Peter?
Nothing. For those of you who know her, would you believe Anne-Marie Ray was with him at the moment?
Yeah, she's really going to get it now. We were hoping. So she could accept her nomination for the election tomorrow. Yeah. Oh, good. She'll be great. Probably her will be big thing with one. Great. So she can't complain about it. Really said Mark said that she would track down Richard. She has.
Ed was just about to describe how many times we died. Would you just like to pick that up again?
I really don't know. I mean, but more, I've died more times than I've been in bed. Let's put it that way. The sequence we shot in Spain, gosh, I've never been. It was 150 in the shade there, and I was in this World War I GI uniform, and they have it over there. I'd like to see that because it was a fun sequence.
It was fun.
And the guys come up to me and they said, these two young guys, they said, "Where's the action in town?" And I had to learn this whole list of cantinas. There's the El Rosaritas, El Conchitas, El Juanitas, and it was a whole list of girls' names. And they sent me the script before, and I learned it, and I come there, and on the breakfast at the morning of we were going to shoot it, the director said, "Oh, Eddie, by the way, we've had to change all those names because of political correctness." We were talking about it earlier, because the women's groups might be offended because all the places of sin and corruption are named after women. So I had to learn a whole new list of names. I remember that. And got out there, and it was broiling in the sun. And then we finally did the close-up. Somebody took a still of it. They said they were going to send it to me. They never did. But I said, "Look, when you come in for the close-up, I'm going to take my pants off, okay?" So my pants are down around my ankle, and the camera's up here like that. It was really broiling hot out there in Spain, yeah. It was out there 4 or 5 days, yeah. But I haven't seen it. Has the series gone out in America, do you know, or?
It's almost finished in the States.
Ah.
Only one episode to go.
Young Indiana Jones, yeah. Well, any more filler questions until the phone rings? Annie?
What is your favourite piece of work so far that you've done in any theatre, film, TV?
Oh, wow. I would have to say, without only a slight hesitation, obviously the UFO. That's my favorite piece of work, you know. I mean, when you're together with somebody for that, and it's had such an impact on your, career, etc. And I enjoyed it. I did. I just wish that certain things could have been different, that it could have been a bit more successful, say, or had a longer life to it. But yeah, I would have to say that the UFO work. Sonia?
Is there anything in particular that you wish that you hadn't done, or that you'd really like to do?
No, I've thought about this. I say I do a lot of voiceover and television commercial work and documentaries. I narrate a lot of documentaries, anything that requires a sort of corporate American voice. And I don't do now anything connected with the arms industry, and I don't do anything connected with the tobacco industry. But I did do a lot of that kind of work prior to my finding out, that it's a hell of a way to make a living. There are a lot of firms in Europe who make armaments, landmines, guns, tanks, and they want to sell them to America. So they get an American voice to say, this is our latest killing device. And I did a lot of them, and they pay fairly well. And also when they banned tobacco advertising in most of the Western world, like London, they then targeted all their advertising on the third world. And I did a lot of work with, hey man, you want to look tall and be cool, get yourself a Marlboro and that sort of thing. These poor, the third world, they really need that, you know. I'm sorry I did that kind of work, but I mean, that's, but basically I don't think that there's anything else that I would take exception to. I gave it my best shot, whatever it was.
All right. To interrupt for a second. Everybody yell out, hello, Richard.
Hello, hello Richard.
That was true of your friend. All right. We're going to take just a couple of quick questions. Richard's in the Pennsylvania Hotel in New York City at the moment. And they've just finished one day of a convention over there. As I said, Anne-Marie Ray was busy terrorising things. So don't let her cook for you. Whatever you do, don't let her cook for you. Okay, we've got some quick questions. Okay, what's the latest updates on Star Trek? Next Gen. Right. I'm going to repeat some of it because it's not coming through. So 7th season is the final season of Next Gen.
Oh.
Right, when they finish 7th season, they go straight into the first Next Generation movie. So far, the only actor to sign for the movie is Patrick Stewart. Okay, keep going. Right, David Carson is directing the movie. Which is November, isn't it? Yeah. And the release date's been moved up to November in the States. Right. Okay, quick question.
Will any of the cast members get to sing in the final season?
Will any of the cast members get to sing in the final season? Not yet. Not yet, but Star Trek the musical could be there. Yeah.
Who are the stars of the convention?
Who are the stars of the convention? We just ran this through the second ago. Brent Spiner, Gates McFadden, Majel Barrett, David Carson, Ronald D. Moore, Brandon Braga. So it's only a small one. Richard's there as well. All right. What's the next word on Deep Space Nine? Deep Space Nine is doing well.
Now I know it's Richard.
7 years of Deep Space Nine. Okay, Star Trek Voyager should start filming in August or September. Once they finish with the Next Generation movie. And you, of course, will be here in September next year, back in Brisbane, and Canberra in April. Hopefully. Oh, well, we'll pass that on. Any other quick questions before we let him go to bed?
Well, what happened in his legal action against Paramount?
What happened in your legal action against Paramount? Or don't you want to talk about it? They amicably resolved their differences.
They paid him off.
Is Kirstie Alley in the next spin-off?
No, Kirstie Alley is not in the next spin-off, Kevin. No, he was jumping up and down. Okay, we'll let you get to bed. Everybody say a big thank you and say hello. Well, you can say hello. He's just sitting here. Hold on. Say hello. It's Richard Arnold.
Hello, Richard. How are you? Yes, indeed. Yeah, whenever they ask me and I'm free, I'm there like a shot. Yeah.
Waiting with that Next Generation.
Well, they're certainly enjoying themselves down here.
Captain's
certainly enjoying talking to us. Yes, you've been here. Okay, well, as I say, I'll let you get back to bed or go to bed. What time is it there? Oh, well, the town's just waking up. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, nice talking to you. Here's Peter.
Thank you very much for all your help, and we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye. Say bye, everybody. Bye. Oh, you're
Well, I don't know if your technology has let you down, but my watch has started to work. So I think then, if there's no more, I think we probably have come to the natural end of this session. And if we have one... I'm sorry, what?
What would you like to work on the James Bond films?
Oh, great fun. Great fun. They had enormous budgets, and it's always enjoyable to work on a film with a big budget. You could set that in concrete. We had a guy, Basil Newell, who did a lot of makeup on UFO. You may see his name in the credits. And he worked on all the Bond pictures. And to give you an example, I would come into makeup every morning with Basil, and he had this huge mattress rolled up in the corner of his makeup room. A huge, big sponge rubber mattress. And I said, Basil, why have you got that mattress? He said, well, it's not a mattress. He said, but I was working on the Bond picture. And I just mentioned to them that I wanted some sponge for makeup. And you know, for makeup, all you need is a little, but you know, on a Bond picture, they don't think in little, they go big. Basil needs sponge. Get him sponge. And it's wonderful to be able to work in that kind of environment where money is, well, not like confetti, but it's certainly a big budget picture. It's always a pleasure to work on them. They can be a little daunting, you know, hundreds of technicians and a lot of technology and a lot happening, and it does increase the tension a little bit, but I enjoy working on them, I must say.
Ed, could I ask you a question quickly?
Sure.
John and I were just asking each other, I haven't seen a bleeper on UFO. A blooper? Blooper? What are those?
They didn't make stuff up.
And I look at some of the UFOs and very straight faces, you know, how you could ever sort of not crack up or let sort of, you know, just sort of there I am sort of thing, and I'm waiting for a smile or a laugh or a chuckle sometimes. So did you ever sort of break out fits of laughter when the camera wasn't sort of on you sometimes, or things like that? Something that was funny there?
Well, I'll tell you, the guy who was the wit on the unit was George Sewell. And George had this sort of Cockney wit, which was like a machine gun. You know, he's very quick, very, very witty. And I'm not noted for that, I must say. And I'm kind of, I don't know, serious, I suppose. But that's why George and I got along very well, because he was always making the jokes, and he was always the favorite of the crew. Hi, good morning, George. And they were always making jokes, and there was a lot of levity. Michael was very serious. He certainly was not humor-oriented. And I've got a sense of humor, I think, but it's very, very dry, very droll. But George, by contrast, was up. You know, he was very, very witty. I never forget this. There was an Englishman who rowed across the Atlantic, and he came on the set at 8:30 in the morning. He says, well, and I can't do his Cockney accent. He said, well, he says, a bloke rowed across the Atlantic. His wife flew over to meet him, and she kissed his Rolex. I guess you had to be there, you know. And, oh, yeah, we were filming once The Responsibility Seat. And there was a scene where I get up out of my chair behind the desk there, and I say, well, it's all yours, Alec. And I go through the sliding doors, and he sits in the chair, and he reaches, just as a bit of business, not on a take, but in rehearsal, he reached over and picked one up my cigars, and he lit it, and that was the end of the shot, okay? And the director says, hey, that's good, George, leave the cigar in, you see. And so on the take, I said, well, I had my briefcase here. I opened it, and I just close it, say, well, she's all yours. And I closed, I said, well, she's all yours, Alec. I closed the case, and I opened it up very quickly. I took the cigars, and I emptied it in the case and left. But over 15 months, one joke is not much. But there wasn't a lot of time for levity, but within the framework that you could make one occasionally. But
I will interrupt again.
have we reached the Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Let's do that.
So if there's no more questions, we might ask people if they would like to have autographs. And we have a selection of pens.
And if you could make a table and let them look at that, is it possible?
Do you think we should have a chance at that?
Well, if somebody kept, I'm sure this crowd here would...
Alrighty. In that case, take it very carefully.
If I went down to this end...
I'll move it onto the other side of the table there and put a card next to it.
Okay.
That way we'll have unfettered access to this table.
Okay. And here's the...
I don't know what you've done.
as we get all the props in. It's a hell of a way to make a living, isn't it? Jesus. It didn't convey the heat there. I was talking about this yesterday. It was about, 105, over 100 in the shade. Really, really terrible. Well, hi, we're all back here again. We don't have to stay specifically with the UFO. I mean, is there any other we'd like to have about general ranging topics outside of Jerry Anderson's particular output, or as we seem to have a very interesting discussion here on all aspects of filmmaking, whatever. I've had the pleasure in my 30-odd year career of working with a French crew. I made a motion picture in Paris at one time. An Italian crew, German crew, Yugoslav, American, of course, UK. And it's a funny thing about it, although the languages are obviously different, there's a kind of unspoken camaraderie, is the only word I can use to describe, about the motion picture industry. People even laugh at the same things, even though you're not speaking the same language. You just know that something is funny. I was once in Germany filming a commercial for German television. I didn't have to speak. It was a very intelligent commercial for the German railroad. And it was a very clever ad, because the camera was in this little compartment, and we were going along in the train as it went from Munich to Hanover someplace. And we started turning over at 8:30 in the morning, and all I had to do was light up a pipe and look smug. And this commercial was only 30 seconds long, and it was for the German railways. And hearing traffic reports on the road, this Autobahn is all congested, that's congested. This guy's sitting smug in the train smoking a pipe. Very simple, very clever thing. But we filmed that. But we had to get a perfect take because there was no cutaway. We just stayed on this smug guy, started tight on the pipe, and the camera pulled back and the lens opened up and we saw where the guy was, and he was lighting his pipe and he just looked contented looking out the window. Well, we must have shot that in that day close to 75 times at minimum. And trying to look smug 75 times from beginning to end was quite right, because they had to get a perfect, idyllic thing out the window, because they couldn't go slums or there was anything negative. Beautiful. And we're incarcerated in an apartment all day, and I can't recall any of the incidents because, I mean, those kind of jokes that only occur for that moment, and you can't translate them or tell them later. They're not anecdotal. But we laughed because we knew what we were talking about, this language, this universal language between people engaged in the film business. And you know who knows what they're doing as soon as they come on the set. And if somebody is not up in their craft, that's the fastest way to lose respect from other people. So there's a constant, I keep using this word tension, but it's a good word because it indicates that it keeps everybody on their toes. Nobody wants to be shown to be lacking in front of their fellow professionals. And that's why they say, oh, well, David's going to say here. So I'm putting David to sleep. Hands up, all those going to sleep. Okay, I'll carry on. But people say, well, you see, if you do theater acting, you're in front of a live audience, but you don't have that live audience on a film set. Well, that's rubbish, because you've got all of your fellow professionals, and as I intimated yesterday, they're very stern critics. And to get a prop man or some other craftsman to come up afterwards, a scene, and say, gee, Eddie, that was really good. You know, it's wonderful accolade, wonderful reassurance. And I worked with an Italian crew in Rome, and there was a big football match going on. And the first assistant came up to the director, Peter Sadsby, British television director, and the first assistant said, Senor, it's a big football match today. The crew, they want the afternoon off. Is that okay? The guy said, well, gee, I don't know. He says, everybody's going to take the afternoon off. We've got to close down shooting. He said, what will they do if I say no? He says, they go anyway. So he said, then the assistant said to him, well, this way, if you say you can go, they think you're a great guy. But they'll go anyway. And that was the kind of Italian attitude, if you like, the sort of self-indulgent, if you like. French crews, I mean, I never forget, we went out to this chateau at 8 o'clock in the morning. We were filming, and they had lined up all this glasses of red wine. 8 o'clock in the morning, all the crew were knocking back this red wine at this time. But they were used to it, so it didn't bother them at all. And the disciplines, like that, the different attitudes may vary, but there is this common thread of appreciating a fellow professional, regardless of what his particular craft might be. I also had the pleasure to film in Sarajevo, in Zagreb, in a wonderful, wonderful country. And we worked with Yugoslav actors and Yugoslav crew, and again, I had no idea. This was about 2 or 3 years before this all erupted. I had no idea what was going to happen here when the Soviet bloc broke up, and there was a whole breakup, and this nationalism would rise up. And I think back to those actors and technicians that I knew there, and I wonder how they're making out now in that nightmare that is Yugoslavia. Which is all getting back to the standard discipline of the difference between the 9 to 5, almost 9 to 5 type of existence that you have when you work on a television series, because you're working with the same crew and the same actors and the same people more or less. And as I said, with UFO, we worked about 15, 16 months together. So it gets to be almost like a regular job. But it's part of the enjoyment of this business is going over to Spain just to shoot a little tiny part like that, or going over to Yugoslavia, or traveling all around the world. And I'm glad to see that they've got a good production schedule out here at the Warner Brothers studio, and I hope that many international companies do come in for the actors and technicians and people here like Robert, who will hopefully get exposure to that and learn and become acquainted with and exposed to and enjoy this wonderful international camaraderie, which is the film business. Well, I've rumbled on long enough now, so we're going to get to these question and answer periods, because it is the questions that help trigger me off to get some kind of thing. Maureen?
With a set series like UFO, for example, when it's first conceived, like, I mean, whoever, like the producer or whoever that management, how do the scriptwriters then, do they put out a general announcement to their grapevine that there's going to be a new television series something, and all the scriptwriters then get busy and send all their scripts in? That's how it works, and then as it goes on, if somebody's going to cast it, and then do they find out, and then they will write the script about how, and they choose the best one? Is that...
Well, in the particular case of UFO, Jerry had his stable of writers, headed by Tony Barwick, who had written a lot of the Captain Scarlet Thunderbird scripts. And there were several other writers who wrote for Jerry. And I think that was probably his reservoir of writing talent when he set up this project to go to Lou Grade. However, what they have done in the past in the feature industry, if they're doing a television series, they will in fact put it out to tender, if you like. They'll farm it out. They'll contact agents more than just give a carte blanche, send in your script. And the agents will go among their writers whom they represent and say, hey, Paramount is doing a series called Star Trek, and this is the format, you know, to go forth where man has never been before, and come up with these are the characters that they're going to have, and come up with your suggestions. And somewhere in the agent's stable of writers, they will come up with treatments, and those will be read by the story editor on the series permanently, or the director and or the producer, and they'll say, gee, this guy's got a good idea, let's have him in and develop his idea even further. That's in a television series situation. In a feature film, as we intimated earlier, they will start with the script invariably. So the script is already written by a guy, and the script is then picked up by somebody, and he flogs it around and maybe tries to get a star first interested in it, and then they'll go and get the money, or vice versa. They get the money first and then the star. That doesn't really matter. But I think it starts with the script. But in the sense of a long-running or moderately long-running television series, they will start probably with their own writers, maybe the first X number of scripts already written in the can, and then they will farm it out through agents. Hardly ever will it get out beyond that closed shop, you know, the way they'll advertise in Variety or whatever, and say, send us in your scripts. The chance of a film script or a TV script getting picked up by somebody sending it in a plain brown envelope, you know, script department, Paramount Pictures, or wherever, is 1,000,000 to 1. Literally 1,000,000 to 1. Although they have people who must read them and send back a letter, thank you very much for your thing. It's more public relations than anything else. But it is kind of a closed shop, simply because they know the writers can deliver. And that's why they'll go to those known quantities. They'll go to known sources of support, because there's no risk involved. And if they're risking their money on the project, they want to minimize it as much as possible. That's why an unknown actor is a risk, because you don't know, he may get out there, he can't learn his lines, and unfortunately I've been on film sets where actors have come unstuck. They can't learn their lines, they can't hit the mark, they can't do this, and suddenly the director's out there and he's in a terrible situation. So but once you get your track record established, life becomes a lot easier. So it's a bit of a slog in the beginning, but once you've got on the trail and you've got a few credits to yourself, whether you're a writer or whatever, life becomes a lot easier. I hope that answers that. Does that elucidate it? Yes, Mike?
You mentioned just then about actors not being able to hit their mark.
Oh, yes. Hit the mark. If the camera's there, okay, there's the whole big camera there, and the director wants me to come in, and the camera's standing there, and he wants me to come in to this position here and address this meeting, and the camera's there. It's no good if I come here, or it's no good if I go there, because there's a cut, or Eddie, you got to hit your mark, you know, it's over there. And so that is literally hitting your mark. There's a mark on the floor, and you've got to get there because the camera's there. It's in focus for that position. So if you step out, everything in there is sharp. Over here, it's soft. It's out of focus, or over here, over there. So you've got to literally hit your mark. There's a wonderful story about Spencer Tracy. You know, if you look at old Spencer Tracy movies, he always walks in, and he says, "Well, Catherine, I'm here to tell you that, well, you're not going to be able to do that, yabba dabba dabba dabba." And somebody said, "Mr. Tracy, is this a acting manifestation of yours? Every time we see you, you come in and you look down, you seem to draw your strength from the ground, and you draw, go forth." He says, "No, no," he says, "I'm just looking for my mark." If you get 4 or 5 different actors in a and I'm standing here talking to you, then somebody come in and walk over here and talk to me. I say, "Excuse me," and I talk to him. He's got to hit his mark. Somebody comes in over there and they've got to hit their mark. It can be sometimes very confusing because it's about 8 or 9 marks on the floor, and every actor's got to hit the right one. You see, not, "Oh, that's mine. Oh, you're over there." And to take it even further, there are situations where you're driving a car, and what they will do, they'll put a chalk mark on the tire, a straight line on the tire, and then they'll put a straight mark on the sidewalk or the road, and it's up to you to drive the car. Hopefully, the 2 lines will come into perfect synchronization. And I must say, I'm not bad at that with a car. If somebody tells me, you know, drive in here and the camera's there, drive in here and say your lines, then drive off, I can usually handle it, because you obviously can't take a mark from the road, but that's just for the cameraman to know that you were on your mark. But if you've got a wing mirror, a side view mirror there, or a tree or something, you can use as to drive up and, you know, use as a kind of guideline for it. But the guys who amaze me, I've never done it, but I would be, like I said, listen, I never got in bed in a movie, and I've never done this, which is to, you see these guys gallop in on horses, and they hit their mark on the horse, and say their line. A guy gallops in, and he says, "The Indians are coming," and gallops off. I said, "Wow, that's wonderful." I mean, it's incredible to do that. That's, all right, it's a long answer for hitting your mark, but that's, yeah, you could even use it as they do occasionally in life. You're way off your mark on that attitude or whatever, you know. Hitting your mark. In the back.
Yeah, just wondering if you could, we talked about film a lot, but if you could talk about some of the stage work you've done, for instance, the play you were doing during the convention, the reason you couldn't come over.
Yes, well, I enjoy doing theater, not as much as I do working with films, but the play we did was the story of Beatrix Potter. Everybody know Beatrix Potter, the woman who wrote and it was an interesting, we did it first on radio in England. It was done on the BBC radio, and then somebody had an idea that it might work on stage, which is a very unusual path for a play to go from radio to the stage. And Beatrix Potter was a very interesting woman, and she had written all of these bunny rabbit stories in a very short period of her life. She made a lot of money, and she then retired to the Lake District in England and bought up land, bought as much land as she could. It was she who helped found what they called the National Trust in England. And when she died, she gave all these tens of thousands of acres that she had bought out of these stories to the nation. I'm sure that they must have something similar here in the UK, in Australia. But she wrote these stories and made a lot of money, and then she turned her back on the literary world, and she went up and she raised sheep, and she married a lawyer, and that was supposed to be the end of her life. But then this American guy came over and tried to get her to write more stories, come out of retirement, and write for America, write American characters. And she, of course, did not want to do this. She was a very headstrong woman, very opinionated, very rugged individual, very outspoken. So you could see Val Lehman playing that part, I'm sure. And she agrees to do it. And she does it, and it doesn't work out. So you have the interesting aspect of when is the artist finished, when there is a creative period in an artist's life, and when it reaches its epoch, it's over. When we've seen the best of their work. And should you disturb that? Should you try to keep on making the same thing ad infinitum for money, just money? So there were a lot of interesting themes in the play, and it was extremely brilliantly performed by Val. She didn't do it on the radio. We had an English actress, Stephanie Cole, play it on the radio, and I thought she was brilliant. And I didn't think Val was going to work out, quite frankly. And the first couple of days of rehearsal, I had my reservations, but she really took the part and really made it her own. I was very, very pleased about that. So unfortunately, the play got very good notices, but unfortunately, as I was told one or two of you, that not many people came. And I think the problem was, one of the problems, everybody associates Beatrix Potter with rabbits and porcupines and whatever, and they thought this might have been a hedgehog play or something. And somebody said, I'm doing this play, and they said, what are you doing, Eddie? Are you a rabbit or something? So, but it's very difficult to market it. But we're hoping that a play might come out of it, and it would also make a very good subject for a nice low-budget film shot up in the Lake District in Cumbria in England. Would be very, very scenic there. And also this idea of how the National Trust got started with her contribution. So it may yet happen. May yet happen. And of course the theater work in London, in the UK, is very active in the fringe. Because the West End, as those of you who have been here, Kathy was telling me she went to see Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet, is very, very expensive. So what has happened is a kind of an off-Broadway, inexpensive type theater where the actors work for nothing or expenses only, and the young directors, young writers, young designers can find their feet in this fringe theater. And I'm becoming more and more interested in that. I've got a couple of projects that I would like to get launched to help a couple of young directors whom I've met. get started. And it's kind of exciting, and I'm quite enjoying that work. But I'm really available for motion pictures. In the back there.
How much do their own personality come into their character?
This is a $64,000 question. It really is. Yeah. The I would say, as a broad stroke, that it's a heck of a lot easier to cheat on stage than it is on films, because I believe that the camera gets into your soul. It is very, very. I don't think you can lie so good to the camera. I mean, when I don't know, those of you who heard yesterday that I told about the Deborah Winger, Richard Gere story about Officer and a Gentleman. I found out subsequently that they couldn't stand each other, apparently. These young actors told me. So the dedication involved in their portrayal of those lovers, the intimacy that they conveyed was brilliant. I'm agog at it. So I think that films requires more of you, not so much artifice. It gets into the residual, the basic yourself, and that's not always a pleasant journey to make, because we exist on a kind of, we come to terms with ourselves, with our imperfections, with our weaknesses, with our fears and our insecurities. We mask them over, you see. But the camera gets in there and it can't, it cuts right through that. And I always say, when I meet people or I'm interested, like the politician, look behind the eyes. When the guy, he's on television saying, if I'm elected, what I'm going to do, look behind the eyes if you can, because there lies the truth. So I should say in films, as a broad generalization, there's probably more of your own personality than you will find anywhere else. Certainly on stage, because you put on funny makeup, and wigs, and costume, and jump around, and you meet the actor later. My God, was that you? I didn't recognize you. But in films, it's a little bit different, and it's kind of frightening, to have this lens coming into you, and you have to defend. You have to invent ways to protect yourself from that intrusion. And some of the better actors don't try to protect themselves. They just reveal themselves, just let themselves be, this old terrible word, natural. Or what is being natural? Me being natural is protecting myself, not revealing myself. Then there is the area of guys who are totally devoid of any acting whatsoever, and it's all their personalities. And I was just out of drama school around the turn of the century, and I got a tiny part in a film called, well, here I am still at the end of my career doing tiny parts, in a film called, oh, I forget, but it was with Robert Mitchum and another actor, myself. We're in a little three-handed scene. I had a few lines of dialogue, and I was sitting there talking to Mr. Mitchum, and he would be sitting there talking to you with a glass of scotch. And he'd be there and he'd, well, Ed, what do you think you're going to be doing? Is you going to stay here in England or anything like that? And we'd be talking about the weather, anything you wanted to. He was just talking like that, Ready on the set, Mr. Mitchum. And he'd walk over and you'd see him go over and there would be no change. The man would not. And he would just say his dialogue exactly the same as he was talking to you off the set like that. Yes, well, I figure that's fine. Okay, right, that's fine. And cut. All right, now, Eddie, what were you talking about over there? I said, there was absolutely nothing. I mean, the guy just, what you saw was what was there. And that is art. I mean, that is really art, because we put things on. We speak a little bit slower, we speak a little bit faster, we speak a little sterner, or we tighten up a little bit, but not those guys. Absolutely. I've never worked with him, but people said that was absolutely true. I mean, there was no visible difference whatsoever. I mean, the guy would just simply go from A to B in front of the camera, and that was it. And it got a kind of sincerity. You know, you got really into that personality, and you were terribly interested in him, and the camera loved him, because the camera can, like the microphone, like certain people and hate others. And there's two actors standing on the screen, and they're both dressed exactly the same. They both are saying the same dialogue, and they're both dressed, they both look similar, but your eye will go to him over there, and you work that one out. You can't. It's just part of the mystery of the medium. And it is these residual areas of mystery that we can't really analyze. You can talk about it, but there's a little bit of magic that makes it all work. I had the pleasure of attending drama school in England at the same time Donald Sutherland was there. And it sounds ridiculous to say so now, but I can guarantee you that I napped that guy for stardom, because you went into the theater and Donald could be just standing over there. And I swear your eye would go to him for some unknown reason. And he had this lugubrious kind of look about him and this slow delivery, and he was just fascinating. You couldn't, what is he doing? Why? Stop that, you know. It's great, but yeah. Another long answer to a short one. Yeah, you've got to get more of your own personality into the film than you do on stage, certainly. And the trick of the week is how to do it. Sir?
What brought you to acting in the very beginning?
Well, I have a theory that all actors are kind of arrested development. I think it was Humphrey Bogart. Now, yes, it was Humphrey Bogart who said, and I agree with him 100%, this is no way for a grown man to make a living. And I do believe that. I think it is this kind of wanting to show off. I can do it, you know, let me do it. You know, you see little kids, yeah, I can sing, let me do it, I can dance, I can sing. And I don't think some actors ever lose that. However, the veneer of sophistication and indifference and coolness is, basically, it is a desire, I think, to show off. And I think I probably always had that, because I really wanted to be, I think, an actor for as long as I can remember. Although when I was growing up in America in the 40s and the 50s, they once did a survey of the most socially accepted professions, crafts and trades in America. And they had a list of 13, and number 12 was actor. Number 13, I never forgot, it was migratory farm worker. One notch above a cotton picker and pea picker, you know, and the top was doctor, lawyer, whatever, etc. So in my background, they fought against this, you know, and you had to be this. So I had a couple of false starts. I went to, you know, teachers training college. They wanted me to be a teacher and this and the other. But I knew that gradually I would get into the theater and be an actor. I just think it was something I kind of always wanted to do. I know some guys just drift into it by accident. Sean Connery, Georgie Sewell was a guy. I don't know if you know George. He was actually in a pub, and the wonderful English directress Joan Littlewood was holding open auditions, and she was one of those directors who worked with people off the street, no training. She hated trained actors. She wanted naturals. And Georgie had a couple of pints, and they said, hey, come on. So he went over, and that's how he started his career in 64, no, earlier than that, 58, I think, 59, somewhere in there. And Joan was doing Oh, What a Lovely War, and George got in that. But he was a natural, George. He worked well on films and television. But I think that's how I got into it personally, is I think I always wanted to be it. When I was in the Army, 2 years in the Army, I wrangled my way so I was a radio announcer. High school, I always enjoyed doing all the plays there. And there were also more girls in the drama club than there were on the football team. And I never liked locker rooms. I always felt uncomfortable in locker rooms, all those guys in sweat, and I like to be over there with the girls. Sonia.
It just seems to me that it takes a certain amount of courage to be an actor to reveal that much of yourself, or to risk revealing that much of yourself. The public scrutiny almost fails, or even just one feels.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the older you get, it either works one of two ways. You are prepared to reveal more of yourself. You reach the late afternoon of your life in your career, say, and you don't really care particularly one way or the other. Whereas before, you were always performing, giving them what you thought they wanted. You know, as a trained monkey, you were trying to, you know, this is the market that demands this, so I will do that. And later on in your life, you give more of a personal commitment that we were talking about earlier. But what amazes me is young people, you know, with no problems and no track record, no heartbreak, no disillusionment, no pain, are able to replicate that with such ease. I find that amazing, and you see it occasionally in some very young actors. I'm not just talking about behaviorists, the guys who come out and do their thing, but young actresses and actors who can convey some way or another this pain of life and be so young. I mean, this is the thing that amazes me.
Why does Captain Scarlet sound like Cary Grant?
Why is this the question?
Yeah.
Well, Francis Matthews does a fantastic impersonation of Cary Grant. And he did it on the, I suppose he auditioned like, as I did, read for Jerry so they could hear their voices. And there was executive producers and Sylvia and all the rest of them, excuse me, were there. And he did it, and they applauded it. And therefore he did it. I mean, it's as simple as that. If they said, hey, don't do that, that sounds too much like Cary Grant, he would have changed it, I can guarantee you. But I think it was just, it worked, it was unique. I read a lot of books for a firm called Chivers Publishing Company in the UK. And one of the books I've done about 6 episodes, different books. They're sort of detective stories set in the financial district of Wall Street in New York City. And the head guy, I forget the character's name, but just as a caprice, I mischievously started to read it, thinking that the director in the control room would say, hey, Eddie, what the hell are you doing? Cut it out. I made him sound like Ronald Reagan. And because at the end of every detective story, as you know, there's a great summation when the head character says, well, I began to suspect him when he said this, and when the policeman came around here, I knew that he was wrong, you see, because he lifted up that, and I figured they would cut me off and say, hey, cut it out, and they didn't. So I just carried on doing it, and it seemed to work, so they called me back again to the same character 6 times. But that's basically the story. I think it's as simple as that. Francis just did it, and it worked. And it became very unique, and it's quite charming, too, because there's a whole generation who never heard of Cary Grant, you know. And to them, that's the way Captain Scarlet speaks. Yeah.
Can you tell us about your experience on the Kenny Everett show?
The what?
The Kenny Everett show?
Kenny Everett, yeah, those who don't know him, is a zany comedian in the UK, and he's had an extraordinary career. He was happily married, and then he came out as a gay guy. He was married to an absolute breathtakingly beautiful girl, real centerfold material, you know. And then he came out as a gay guy, and he was absolutely anarchic. He was a real anarchic comedian, that off the wall. Anything went, and to be with him was quite an experience. And I got on that sort of comedy routine where a lot of the comedians, Jasper Carrot and Rory Bremner, Kenny Everett, and a lot of those guys, they had shows, and I would do a shot on them. And I did several of the Kenny Everett shows, and they were great fun to do because it was so unusual, and it made a great change, a welcome change, I may say, from the usual parts where I get with suits sitting behind desks. I mean, that part like that, I'd like to have done a bigger part like that, you know, spitting tobacco and all that. It was great fun. And that's the kind of thing you got a chance to do on the Kenny Everett show. But Kenny, he was a very staunch member of the Conservative Party, the Mrs. Thatcher's party in England, and he made a very terrible faux pas at one of their party conventions, and he was getting everybody dancing and singing at the convention. He said, "Hey, let's go nuke the Russians," or something. They all applauded, and they thought, because they're kind of right-wing. And that really brought him into disrepute, you know. He got a lot of flack as a result of that. And then he ran away, and he ran away with a Spanish waiter in a tight two-shot off into the distance, and up music roll credits. And I thought that was the end of his career, but he's come back, and now he's ill. Yeah, yeah. An extraordinary career, but and a sad one, you know, with this ending. I don't know whether he's died or not, but he was certainly HIV positive with it. But an extraordinary guy, great fun to work with because it was totally unpredictable. I'm sorry, what? No, I never encountered that, no. Yeah, thank goodness. Anybody else want to raise any other? Yes, sir.
Can you tell us some of your interests outside your sort of professional career? I know that you're interested in sailing, for instance.
Well, no, that came about when I was doing a job on a television play, and I had just gotten married, and I said to this my fellow actor, I said, my wife and I have never had a proper honeymoon because Hillary and I got married on a Saturday. I was rehearsing for this play, and we got married on the Saturday, and I carried on rehearsing, and then I went to New York with the play on Broadway, and then Hillary came over and joined me. And that was about the time President Kennedy was murdered. And then we came back to the UK, and we had a couple of kids. And I was doing this television. I said, well, we never had time for a proper honeymoon. And he said, well, gee, I got this yacht down in the south of France. He said, would you like to go down and spend a couple of weeks there? I said, wow. Is the Pope Catholic? I said, gosh, you know, wonderful. And it was literally before I had started working on UFO, just about to start on UFO. So it'd be 67, I think. And we went down there. We had a wonderful month down there on this yacht. And I'd never sailed before in my life. And we got this guy who could sail the boat. And Hillary and I and this guy and his girlfriend, we sailed all around the Mediterranean. Wow, what a lovely life. Because as long as there's wind, you can go. And I said, gee, what an essence of freedom this is. And to me, that would be heaven, would be to have a sailing ship and your partner and just be able to go. So that's why I think I still put it down on the list. Your ambition is to sail around the world. I think that would be a lovely, that's my idea of heaven. But no, I don't have any interest, hobbies like football or tennis or anything like that. I may have said I had a big house, and I do a lot of wallpapering and painting and repairs and electricity, really dull, mundane things like that. And with 4 children, you know, your time is very well taken up, so you're either working or you're at home, and there's a lot to do with 4 children around. And I changed a lot of diapers and, you know, burped babies, and I can feed them and everything like that, you know. And sometimes I'll catch myself. I don't do it now anymore, but if a mother's holding the baby wrong, I say, I'm sorry, mother, you should be, you know, get up here. And so I got to be very careful about that. But no, all of our interest was centered on the family and the home and all the rest of it. And I found that very time-consuming and left little time for anything else. So I don't have any interests. Lately, the last 5, 6 years, I've had a little bit more leisure. I've become more interested in political activities as an activist on various causes, campaign against the arms trade, etc. So I suppose you might say that's an interest, but this has only been very recently, comparatively speaking. How are we doing for time, organizers? There's no, a girl in the back? Yes, sir. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, that was the film you're talking about, or the series? Yeah. Well, the TV series was I had worked for the director John Redmond before, and Humphrey Barclay, the producer. So when this part came up, they thought of me. And I enjoyed that enormously. For now, hands up those who have seen it, otherwise I won't go on about it too much. Pardon? 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 Yeah, John Cleese. It was an excellent TV series, but I just think that there was too many stories in the series trying to get out. They had too much packed in. If they had thinned it out a little bit, it would have been more effective. But it was a very, very popular cult kind of comedy. And the film, I was going to do the part that I had done in the series again, but I was in a stage play, and unfortunately couldn't get out. So they, as a gesture, they gave me that tiny little thing as the interviewer of Loretta Swit. See, that's another thing about theater work. Once you engage yourself to do it, it's very, you can't get out of it. There's no way you can work around it. It's possible if you get involved in a film and something else comes up, you can say to the director, wow, I've got this. It's very rarely happens, but it is possible for him to juggle his shooting schedule so that you can get that week off. But once you're in the theater, boy, every night, 7:30, that's it. You've got to be there. And if they're filming way outs over there and they can't guarantee to get you back, forget it. It's a very, very strict discipline. And in the matinee, in the midweek, 2:30, you've got to be there. That's why a lot of actors don't bother. They'd rather turn down a theater job to keep themselves available for film and TV work. But I don't like to do that, you know. I like to, but unfortunately this film comes, so I didn't get involved in the thing. But I enjoyed the series enormously. Even though not many people saw it, the basic part was this guy was a news reader. He read the news, okay? And he read it in a machine gun fashion, like as rapidly as possible. And it was a bit of a problem because we did it in front of a live audience. And it was very difficult because the audience would try to laugh. But I, as a newsreader, couldn't pause for the laughter of the audience. WBC Dateline News around the clock, around the globe from WBC Worldwide News. Good morning, I'm Jay Garrick. Here's the Coffee Time headlines. Mashik Rassim, younger brother of the late Chouard Varane, is to be deported from his home in southern France, where he's been living for the past 7 years since his deposition. The French government announced today that on and on about like that, you know, the whole... And that's a few years ago. So I didn't have auto cue, so because I had to learn it. And I'm bringing in a glass of water to the studio, and the guard says at the door, "Here, mate, no, you can't, no food or drink in the studio." And I said, "But look, I'm an actor, you see, and I've got to, you know, I'm sitting down here at this desk, and I have to say this thing, and I would like a little sip of water occasionally." He says, "All right, mate, but don't let him catch you." So I came in, and I put the glass of water underneath the desk like that, and I'm sort of sitting there waiting for them to finish over there on that set, waiting for my camera to come on there, and it doesn't come on, and they finish over there, so the red light is not on, and I cannot see a screen about as big as this wall behind me that the audience can see. I mean, the screen is up there and the audience is up there, and I'm just down here. And the camera's on, but I didn't know it. So what they see this guy sitting there with his bow tie, waiting, you know, adult, trying to make a living. And all of a sudden I say, "Well, I think I'll have a little drink of water." I said, but I remember what the guard said, and being a law-abiding citizen, I said, "Well, I'll so I do this number, you know. And of course, 573 people are seeing this, and they're falling about laughing. And I said, "What the hell's going on?" I'm not standing up, so my flies can't be open. I said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh my God," I said, "that camera's on, but it's not shooting, it's just monitoring. Because the red light would be on if we were in business." Okay, so I said, "Well," so I played it absolutely, you know, I started to play up to that. Oh, they just went absolutely bananas. So when it actually came to do the take, the audience was on this poor guy's side. I mean, they really loved old Jay Garrick, and this whole page and a half of wall-to-wall words. I just had to brattle it out, and they just got a tremendous ovation at the end of it, you know. And in one take, it all went in. I was very, very pleased with that. That was the opening episode. And then we went on for, what, 6 more episodes, but I had it sussed out by that time. Yeah, whoops, apocalypse.
Just a quick one. You mentioned yesterday you'd appeared in a couple of Bond films. Which ones were they?
I don't recall the titles. I really do not recall the titles.
Forever
Diamonds Are Forever and You Only Live Twice. Okay. With Sean Connery, yeah. And I only had one brief scene with him, and the other one I didn't have any. Just the Hawaiian spotter, yeah. Yes.
Personal question, not about you, but did Sean Connery walk around without his hairpiece on? Or did he always have it on? Because now he doesn't seem to mind.
Yeah.
But in those days, apparently, if you were a bald actor, you know, well, it weren't given to men. Did he walk around?
Well, yeah, I never saw him without it. Let's put it that way. But then I didn't see a great deal of him. I mean, I saw him in the bar afterward, in the restaurant. Whenever I saw him, he had his hairpiece on, yeah.
Because, well, he's married an Australian woman, as you know, and a friend of mine, actually, when he was a younger person, saw him on the beach, and he didn't have a toupee, he was bald. And he was very affronted that, you know, his hero in the James Bond movie was actually bald, because he didn't know.
Yeah.
And he was on the beach up at Friday.
Yes, it's a very tricky thing for an actor because I'm sure I'm not, I mean, the distance of time protects us all, but Michael Billington was bald. And this wig that he wore, is this a revelation or? Okay, well, you hear it all here at Conquest. I haven't come all this way not to give you a little gossip. Michael was bald, but, and as you say, in the 70s, it was one of those things that was not done. You know, I mean, you just weren't bald, and he had this full wig. And part of the thing that I admired Michael with, he always courted the girls on the set that he met with his wig on, and he said, "Well, I'll meet you in the bar later," and he would turn up like that. And it took, because he didn't wear it personally. you know, offset. He was bald, and this bald-headed guy come up, but he was perfectly charming and very confident and relaxed about it, and it was a hurdle which he obviously overcame, but I didn't know Connery was sensitive about it because, I mean, he's such a wonderful actor, and now the older he gets, like fine wine, he gets better and better, so his appearance, I think he can forget about it. But there must have been a period when he was concerned about his appearance as Bond and a sex symbol and all the rest of it, yeah. He was a charming, charming man, he really was. Absolutely wonderful to work with. Very, very serious and very, we get behind the set, we had to step through these sliding doors, and he'd say, "How did that seem to you, Ed?" Great, Sean. You know. But he was really genuinely interested. A serious actor. How are we doing for time, Peter?
Well, I was just coming to say that's about it. Really? You take probably one more question. Anybody got one more question?
I understand you had a wonderful seafood dinner on one of the Bond.
The what?
A wonderful seafood dinner on
The seafood dinner on the Bond picture, yeah. Well, that, hands up those who've heard that anecdote. Well, it's not mine. An actor, Patrick Allen, who worked with us on an episode of UFO, he came in and guested, the one with the little speed cars going around. Ha ha, Straker, I'm over here, big man, all that. I don't know what the name of the episode was, but Pat Allen was there, and he had worked on a Bond picture that wanted to go on to Japan. And the unit came back from Japan, and they were shooting in Pinewood, and somebody, I don't know who it was, that's my agent, say yes. Whatever it is, yes. And somebody on the unit said, gee, it's too bad when we were in Japan, we didn't film the man eating crabs in Osaka or someplace. And Broccoli Saltzman apparently said, what, man eating crabs? Where? He says, yeah. And he said, well, let's get some, bring them from Japan over to the UK, we'll write a sequence for Bond to fall into the pit, or whatever it is, and fight these man-eating crabs. So they brought this whole plane load. That's all they were, was these man-eating crabs, sloshing around in this water. They land in Pinewood, they write the sequence, Bond's walk along, he falls in or something. And wonderful, they're all excited about it, and then they realize that what the mistake they made was that the crabs were nocturnal. And every time the crabs saw light, and no matter how good the filmmaking process is, you must have light. That's number one. You can do without anything, but you must have light to sensitize the film. So they tried everything, you know, ultraviolet light, this kind of light, it just wouldn't work. Every time there was crabs saw anything, they died. They tried to get it all set up. And then they put the lights out for half an hour while they went to sleep, and then, all right, slap on the lights, quick, action, turn over. And apparently at the end, they just got one crab coming up like that or something. It was a total washout. So Broccoli, or one of the Broccoli Saltzman partnerships, said, right, we'll fix the bastards. We'll have a great big crab boil-up. And we'll have a wonderful seafood buffet for the entire unit. And the RSPCA said, no, you brought them over as actors. They got to go back to Japan.
I don't think we've ever ended on a great story before.
Thank you very much.
We're about to wrap it up. Now, I've got to say that I must admit to being a little disappointed this weekend that there haven't been as many of us here as I would have liked, because basically I hope you all go back and go, yeah, we had a great time and you weren't there, ha ha. I've been doing this now for about 5 years, much to the regrets of a lot of people. And